Hello and welcome to the Fresh Labs live show. We do a live show every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, and we cover all things emerging tech in the metaverse, Web3, XR, AI, ML. It's a wide range of topics. Uh, I'm Johnny Rodriguez, Strategic Innovation Director here at Fresh Consulting out of our Austin, our Texas office. And with me is Elisha, our Technical Innovation Director from Fresh Labs at Fresh Consulting.
Yes, and I'm
So our
based in.
show,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I was based in Seattle, so we're doing this live across the
Yeah,
continent. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of one of the cool advantages of technology that lets us do things like this, where we can be live from two different locations and get to all of you. So welcome to all those that are joining from all the different platforms out there. So our show actually has three main segments to it. I want to put some of that on the screen just so we can let everyone know. Let's see here. We have a word of the day that we typically cover. Last week we talked about digital twins. In the past, we've talked about XR. We're going to cover the word minting today, so we'll cover some of that. And then our next segment is on some recent news as it relates to some of the topics we've talked about here. So you have three articles there that we'll be covering. And then our last segment is covering a question of the day, which, as you know, Elisha, we don't really know what the question is that's coming, but we
Yes.
will read it live and then react to it and get some opinions on that. How have you felt about the question of the day so far? Have you felt prepared or caught off guard?
So far, I think we had enough things to say about each question. Maybe it gets harder and harder. We'll see. Yeah, I
Got
think the
it. Got
point
it.
is to not, pretend like we know everything ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
It's still a new industry, and there are things that we might get it wrong or have a misunderstanding or have never thought about it or looked into the particular topic. And I think we
Yep.
want to be real that, hey, we're not pretending to be know it all.
That's right. Yeah, I think right after our live stream, I jumped on a call where we talked about digital twins and the metaverse. Which was our question of the day. Which was our word of the day. And it was
Mm.
interesting to get a perspective from somebody in the space that does that for a pretty large tech company and get his perspective on that. And so, I learned something right directly after the call. So yeah, it's a good point. All right. Well, with that, let's just jump into our first segment there of the word of the day. Let's get that here on the screen. The word of the day is to mint or minting. How much do you know about this term, Elisha? Do you want to start us off with your best definition or understanding of this word?
Yeah, so I started to hear the word minting a lot. I'd say last March. Maybe it was around when the NBA Top Shot and all these like cool NFT projects were happening. And I think for me, the NFT and minting was basically like put together as the term that gets like coined together, right? So whenever there's a new cool NFT stuff comes out, it's like, oh, there's a minting. And then of course you start to hear more terms like airdrop and all these terms that confused me initially. But from what I understand, there are some digital assets, typically graphical or movie elements, and now there's more like music and everything, right? Any multimedia content that you can think of, putting it onto the blockchain so that people around the world could, let's say, see the minted thing online, or they could purchase, sell together. So that's my like basic rundown of like the word minting and how that associates with things like NFT together. What about you, Johnny?
Yeah, I got it. No, I feel the same way. I think the NBA Top Shot was something that was on my radar. I thought about that, and that was actually my very first minted NFT. I minted like a particular play from a player that I don't even recognize, and I watched the NBA just to get a sense for what it was like and
Mhm.
understand minting, right? Um, but yeah, as I understand minting today, I mean, yeah, you kind of nailed it there. I think as far as like being able to have it essentially get put on a blockchain essentially. I often like to think about the process of minting a physical coin, and there's actually a minting process there to get it into circulation. It's the same thing as it relates to kind of this digital side. You basically can you go through a minting process. So OpenSea is one of the largest NFT marketplaces, right? And so I've been a part. I like to buy and sell and invest and mint NFTs. It's something I like to do for fun and understand and learn more about. And I've actually done some minting directly on OpenSea, one of those platforms. I've done it for Solana and other marketplaces, but most of the time I see minting uh, happen on a third party website. So whatever the company is, they might say, "Hey, this is the trusted source," right? If you're following a project that's about to release, there's a lot of hype that leads up to it. They might have a Discord, that there's an active community, and they tell you, "Hey, this is the approved link for minting." So I've done that probably a number of, like, maybe 30 times. I've minted the very first version of, like, an NFT, and they usually assign you, like, a number to it, right? They're like, "Hey, you got NFT number blank," um, and then it kind of gets assigned to you. And what I like most about minting, Elisha, is that if I've been following a project and I really believe in it, instead of me waiting for it to go through the minting process and for it to be out there on the marketplace and to see if it does well or not, if I believe in it, usually I will go through the minting process, because the minting process is actually quite cheap compared to, like, investing it obviously after it's done well. So that could cost between so every time you do a minting on the Ethereum blockchain, there's a gas fee associated to it, which is kind of one of the biggest problems with the whole thing. But it could cost something between $50 to $200. Sometimes, if the project's really hyped and has a lot of backing, it might go slightly up higher. But to mint is usually in that range. And so if I believed in a project, I will mint, and then usually within a week or a month or whatever the time period is that you see, um, and it does well, then the mint is just a fraction of what you paid for it, and now the valuation goes up to, like, hey, it's zero point 0.5 ether, or it's 1 ETH, or it's 10 ETH, or whatever. So I've seen that happen a number of times, and the minting is typically like one of the best entry points, if you believe in a project, where you can might have the biggest return on investment. But that's my
Uh,
closest connection to minting.
yeah, and I believe OpenSea will let you publish your NFT and not pay for the gas fee until it gets sold. I believe. I think there are some mechanism that encourages artists to basically put up, 10,000 collection, but then maybe you don't have to pay a gas fee per, uh, those NFT projects that they upload. How was your
Yeah,
process minting on OpenSea? Was it relatively easy to go through?
it's pretty easy. Well, to clarify, if I'm dropping a collection on OpenSea or somewhere else, then that process can be involved. I have only done that once, and that process was pretty long, actually. There's lots to learn there. But mainly, what I'm minting somebody else's projects. They
Mm.
basically have a collection, and I'm doing the minting process, and it's super easy in OpenSea. It's the same as if you're buying an NFT from OpenSea. The process is exactly the same. The difference is it tells you on the like the in the on the ledger, the digital ledger, it just says it was minted. It's like the first version of it, right? So, and you're right. Like you talked about, lazy minting is what it's called, when you delay, essentially being able to push back that fee to the initial buyer, right? So I can say, hey, let me put it on there, but until it gets bought, that person will take on the cost, and they do that on OpenSea and Open Zeppelin and all these other kind of blockchain, or all these other marketplaces. So definitely one of those buzzwords you hear a lot with NFTs, and where it's a way to show your loyalty to a project. It's a way to get in early. Minting also, for some projects, require you to, like, be on a like you have to be whitelisted, so you have to actually be approved to mint. So there's a lot more terminology we'll get into, I'm sure, in the future there. But there's if you kind of go and search minting out there, it kind of depends. The fees kind of depend. Where you go and do it might be slightly different, but I think what we kind of cover today covers most of that process.
Yeah, I think there is so many terms, right, that people would have to learn to put all these things together. But hopefully, the basics of minting definition is a little bit clear today for everyone who was wondering what that term actually really meant.
Yeah,
Cool.
great. Um, Yeah, and if anybody has any other additional insights, obviously feel free to go ahead and comment. We do have the chat open, and that does feed it into our system here to basically to give us insights into what you're saying. We can put that up on the screen and answer. So, all right. Well, with that, let's jump into our first article that we have today. So, some of the news of the week, right? So, let's jump into the Qualcomm AR. Let me add this onto the screen here. Qualcomm AR. Elisha, do you remember when we were at South by Southwest and we actually saw the Qualcomm AR booth and they had lots of stuff that was all in red and yellow? We probably could have put a photo up here on the screen for it, but they basically had a like a booth to kind of show their involvement of like powering the metaverse, right? Um, so some of the news comes from Qualcomm today. Do you remember that experience?
Yeah, basically they had a showcase for their processing power for other companies to build the end solution for the end users. And Qualcomm,
Yep,
at that time at the booth, I think they explained it that they're not necessarily the ones building the consumer product themselves, but they're trying to
correct.
showcase to their partners to build it.
Yes. So yeah, they have a lot of the processing chips that are used in the AR and VR headsets. Obviously, cell phones, even lots and lots of devices there. So I'll show this graphic here on the screen really quickly. I'll jump to it, but they actually power over 50 different devices. So you can see really popular ones like the Quest 2 or the HTC Vive. You see maybe the Oculus Go, HTC Vive over here. So quite a lot of headsets leverage their chips. So it's and you're right. They're not really targeting consumers. They're targeting manufacturers that are building for consumers. And so the news that came today is actually about Qualcomm releasing a new wireless augmented reality smart viewer reference design. That's a mouthful, but it's important that we put in there that it's a smart viewer because they're not saying this is a headset that you can go and buy as a consumer, and that it's a reference design and it's a reference design for manufacturers. But it's quite innovative what they're doing here. We're going to jump into some details around this. The article is all over. Honestly, I saw it on Engadget, I saw it on The Verge, I saw it on Road to VR. Quite a lot of articles give you different angles of this particular news. But essentially, there's some pretty innovative things, and we've kind of done our best to kind of summarize some of the findings there. It's worth mentioning, Elisha, here that back in February of 2021, so last year, they actually released the thing that you see here on the left. It's another kind of tethered reference design, and basically they gave this to manufacturers and they said, "Hey, this is our latest and greatest augmented reality reference design. So you can leverage, you can use some of the processing, you can leverage some of the designs, but essentially like go and make your own augmented reality glasses." And this is essentially a reference for that with leveraging our tech, our chips, and our processing, and our they even have an XR platform in the background. So there it was called the XR1 platform, powered by Snapdragon, right? And so the one on the left, there's actually thousands of videos of people leveraging it, getting their hands on it, seeing it at different events, and seeing what that looked like. But the big difference you see from the left to the right there is the tethered part, right? It's like, oh, you no longer have to use the cable, and then obviously you're getting a little bit of a sleeker design from the left to the right hand side, right? And I'll go into some details, but does anything jump out to you, Elisha, from seeing these?
Yeah, I think the wireless component is definitely a key. Nobody wants to wear a glass where the cord is hanging from the side. Like one that doesn't look natural, right? People know that something is up with your glasses, and people are gonna notice and comment like, "Wait, what are you doing? Like, are you recording? Are you doing this or that?" And so wireless definitely is, I think, the cool component. It's interesting that they went from maybe somewhat normal looking like a by I don't know how you explain where you have a two separate lens versus
Yeah.
single. I think it's interesting that they chose to go with the single, which definitely signal that I don't know if that's how the I guess the company is going to end up using it as a reference. They probably end up creating like more natural looking glasses, I assume, but that was interesting that they went with the reference of like, hey, this glass is not a normal glasses.
Yeah, that's a good point. It actually brings the thought that some of the leaked augmented reality glasses that, or I wouldn't say leaked, but patents and some leaks and some insider information from Apple's upcoming glasses, they show something very similar to what you see on the right, which is a single piece of glass that's kind of connected like that,
Mhm.
as opposed to two separate. And so I wonder if there's some call to something that might be coming, and they want to be on the same trend of a single piece of glass. Um, how many times has Apple said that, right, with their phones? A single created from a single sheet of metal, a single piece of glass, right? And so there might be elements there that might actually save from a manufacturing perspective and that actually help you separate it. But yeah, I mean, it's sleeker. You're getting 14.2 millimeters to 9.5 millimeters on thickness. That's a significant jump for something that you're wearing on your head. And then even the other part, which is the actual part, not the glasses part, but the part that's actually like showing the screen, that was 25 millimeters, and now you're at 15.6 millimeters. Not too much different on the actual like part that goes along your head or in your ears. So if we jump into some of the specs, here are like the biggest things that stand out from what I saw. Like you talked about wireless. I was telling you, I think as we were prepping for this a little bit, we did a webinar in December where we talked about digital trends and what's coming. And one of the sections we talked about was augmented reality. And I remember specifically saying, I believe that before we get to like mainstream augmented reality glasses, we're going to get a version that is um, non-tethered, so not cabled, right? And but powered, and the processing is done through your cell phone or your watch, right? It just makes sense that you wouldn't carry a PC around, or you didn't have to plug into a PC or plug into a device that goes in your back pocket, like you see with some of the earlier versions last year with Nreal and some of the other augmented reality glasses that are out there. So getting to that wireless experience, but where the processing and computing happens on a device. And so this is the first time I'm seeing that, and I was actually like quite like surprised to see that there's a version of this. But it is wireless. It can be powered by a mobile phone. It can be powered by a puck. It's a PC puck essentially, and again, it's still wireless. And then it could also be done on a PC. Technically, you could still go PC wirelessly, but it's 40% thinner. It's got a better enhanced weight distribution. So now that it's lighter, they distribute it better, which contributes to the next point there of being more comfortable to wear. They have 2 megapixels per eye, so 1920 by 1080p, pretty standard on some on resolution. 90 hertz micro OLED display. As a reminder, OLED's pretty good for getting true blacks and getting kind of higher quality colors in it. And because it's at that 90 hertz higher quality, they're actually able to do remove the motion blur that was existed in the version before it. It does have the full 6 degrees of freedom. So what that means is if I have glasses on right now and I'm looking around in augmented reality, I can look up, down, left, right. The 6 degrees means now I can go forward and backwards, right? So like the Quest 2 headsets, you can walk around without the cable and it knows where you are. It's like a one-to-one mapping of where you're walking, and it kind of does that in the same space. So it has that 6 degrees of freedom. It's got 3 cameras, which you can see pretty obviously here on the screen, right?
Mhm.
You see like the one on the left, right in the center, but they do some cool things there to allow for hand tracking and gesture recognition. My understanding is that they have capabilities to do mouth tracking to be able to see where what your mouth is doing, as well as eye tracking. But on this particular press release, I didn't actually see the cameras on the inside, so I think that's yet to be determined. People that get their hands on it will probably get a better view towards that. Yeah, but it's got Wi-Fi 6E. It's got Bluetooth 5.3, which is like the latest and greatest on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which contributes to its ultra low latency. So they're under 3 milliseconds. So to be able to go from the device, the phone, or the puck to the glasses, we're talking 3 milliseconds of delay of latency, which is, for those that don't know, that is very very low latency. We're talking like a mouse, and like having a Bluetooth or wireless mouse to your screen, and how important that is when you're doing something like gaming or something like that. The milliseconds play a huge factor in that. Uh, anything jump out to you from these specs from what you've seen on others, Elisha?
Yeah, I think the wireless speed component I think is really interesting, and we're gonna actually touch on that in the next segment as well. How this Wi-Fi, and not just the between the devices, that we have with the glass and the pack, but also to the rest of the internet, right? The shorter the latency that we get, the more computing power that we can draw from somewhere else in the
Yeah.
ether, and that essentially allow the device, like glasses itself, to be less powerful on its own. And we don't have to, you know, make it bulky because we can offload the processing power to somewhere else. It almost defy the physics, not by making all these powerful computing smaller and smaller, but instead like isolate and basically source it and stream from somewhere else, as opposed to, you know, more money spent in the glass itself. So I think I like where things are going, where it's the device is just an empty shell, right? That can do what it should be doing, what it should be focused on, which is, you know, recognizing your hand gesture, being a sensor, being a display, but the computing power to be coming from somewhere else. So
Yeah.
I think that's really nice, and I've seen the home routers even getting to the 6G, like
Yeah.
6 gigahertz bandwidth, right? That way you're kind of starting to leave off all devices that are not as compatible, but moving into the bandwidth that is like can reach even farther and
Yep.
less crowded from the rest of the health that's being used in the
Yep.
air. So yeah, I'm really interested in where this is going, and are we
Yep.
probably we're going towards this direction of less computing power trying to be jam packed in one device, but more power to the some kind of source device, whether it's your phone or some other device, and then the hardware that you're wearing itself become less powerful, unless you go into the future like Apple Watch, right? Apple Watch did, I think, the opposite, where it started with the more hard dependency on your phone and then became less dependent on the phone, where now the watch has the Wi-Fi, watch has this and that, where more things actually came back into the watch. So I wonder if we are
Yeah.
going to see the reverse trend again.
Oh, I'm
But for now, the trend of uh, more dependency on glass to
yeah.
be depending on the device seems to be
Yep.
where I see industry is headed to.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. I think that's the wave. It's dependency on device and then it's building it back into the device because something got smaller, something got
Mhm.
faster, and then you'll see that. I won't go through this slide, but it kind of talks about some of the specs there and how that works and the processing that you're talking about. The quote on the bottom talks about that split processing that enables the latency stuff there that they have, but super powerful stuff what they're doing. It's big news. I would say it's big news. If I go back a slide here, it's big news because it's likely to lead to a wave of next generation augmented reality or smart glasses that might come because they're accomplishing that latency, that thing that they, the essentially fast connect. They have an XR specific software. Part of this article talked about, oh, and by the way, they also updated they went from a XR1 platform to an XR2 platform, which is a platform that allows them to do that true wireless traffic between devices and prioritization and bringing over the time critical data, et cetera, so on and so forth. So it should be really interesting to see what kind of devices come from that. As you can tell, a lot of these don't look like the other reference design. So it doesn't mean that they're going to look like this, but it might be something. What it's saying is this is the extent at which it's capable. We can get to this thin and this small and this type of design, and so we'll see and keep an eye on what happens from there.
Yeah. I think my quick prediction of where it's going to go is Apple and Samsung is going to likely lead in this dependency model because they have such an ecosystem of devices connected through the same brand. So, for example, if you have Samsung device, it connects to your fridge, it connects to this, it connects to that. Same with Apple, it has an ecosystem. So I can see a future where the dependency device, like I don't know if it's your phone or some kind of pack or something, right? That you can actually even replace to be a powerful one over time. And then the
Interesting.
glasses itself can just stay as, you know, just a sensory device. And if you want more speed, or if you want 4K resolution, 8K resolution, of course you still have to update display mechanism, but maybe just by replacing a puck, now it supports like a higher frame rate without replacing your glasses. Because I think my
Mhm.
gripe about these things are that once I buy glasses with my prescription, I don't want to keep buying new glasses.
Yeah, you wanna keep updating
Yeah,
every year.
yeah. I just want to update my puck or my iPhone that's
Yeah.
powering the streaming portion of it, right? So I can see Samsung and Apple who are already doing the whole ecosystem of buy into the devices by our brand and you get the benefit from everything, to be the leading player in this game of like just replace your hard dependency and then all your device automatically gets upgraded experience.
Yeah, I love the prediction. I'd love to reference this in the future when they do that with Apple says, "Hey, you're dependent on your iPhone on their first XR headsets or whatever." But
Yeah.
super interesting news there. It kind of leads us to another section here on what is it? The VITURE One. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and this is the hard one because we keep saying Viture or Viture, and I think Johnny, you think this is Viture, and I
Yeah.
watched some official videos. They don't really say the device name. They just say, "Oh, it's extended reality glasses." My guess is that at the time of recording their promo video, they actually didn't have a final product name, so they're like,
Yeah, they
just
had
say
like a code
extended
name.
reality glass." Yeah. So yeah, we're covering VITURE One, and some of you may have seen it. It's a Kickstarter project that got fully funded at this point, and this actually connects to what we were just talking about. It's essentially a glass device. I would say m- portion of it has a AR, but I don't know if it you could call it AR glass, but basically a glass powered to show your gaming screens. So you can see PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and you will also have some stream gaming experience. And you can also see that you can watch movies with Apple TV, Disney Plus, HBO Max. And it's powered by the the device that's sitting on the neck of this model,
Oh, there you go.
which which I thought was very interesting. I don't know if you know about Stream Deck, Johnny, the Stream's new Switch
I
device
do,
that
yeah.
released by Stream, right? Where you can play all the or most of the Stream games, Steam games, sorry. And this some article described this as Steam neck of the gaming, which I thought was interesting. Instead of Steam Deck,
The
it's a
Stream
Steam
Neck.
neck.
The Stream Deck
Yeah,
and then the Stream Neck.
Steam Neck. Yeah.
Interesting.
So this is interesting because this is essentially what we are just talking about, right? The computing power is sitting on your neck, and then it's basically using the wires to communicate the information or the data between the glass and the neck.
Wait, did you
And
say there's a wire on the back,
I
or is it
don't think there.
wireless?
I think it's a wireless. I don't think I see any wire coming from it.
Mm, they
So
must be hiding it well.
yeah, and I wonder if they are using the Qualcomm or something else, right? Because it seems very coincidental. But if I play a YouTube video here, and then I'm just gonna scrub through, and they're kind of trying to juxtapose with the person playing a game on the big screen, right? Like, and there's another guy on the right side where he's just wearing a glass. Oh, I guess I see a
Oh, I
cable.
see the cord.
I see a cord. Okay, never mind. It hasn't reached the Qualcomm's reference design
Yeah,
quite yet. But essentially, the idea, I guess, is the same where, it's still offloaded to the separate device. So the
definitely,
glass
because you don't wanna
itself
carry that weight.
everything. Yeah. But yeah, essentially it's drawing the contrast between the two where instead of playing game at home where you have to have, this 80-inch TV monitor, you can essentially get the same experience just by wearing this glass. And then let me just scrub through. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is a simulated experience where you see through your room, but then just like a holo. It's like a transparent image of the game screen displayed as an overlay to your eyes, and that's where you can play the game, but then you will see the surrounding at the same time. Kind of similar to the Meta's Cambria, where you can combine
The
the
pass-through effect,
pass
right?
through. Yeah, yeah. Except I don't think you can interact with anything, unlike the VR. It's just a display, right?
Oh,
And
interesting.
then yeah. So I don't think it's you could call it AR or any sort of connected reality because I think you're just still playing the game from
No.
Xbox, Switch. But they do try to be smart about like this ambient mode where if you're talking to somebody, the screen shifts off so you're not seeing people's face overlaid on the game screen. It just like
Oh.
shrinks it down. So I'm just gonna play that part a little bit more. So you're on the bus, someone talks to you, like, "Hey, are you playing the game over there?" Ambient mode, switching the screen.
So it
It's
just puts it down on the bottom right, like picture in picture almost.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of like the headphone features these days where someone talk to you or you start to talk to someone else. The volume of the music get quieter so that you can actually talk to the person. So yeah, they're just playing the basketball game, and the idea is that when I was going to the office by bus, I would always get onto the first, I would wait at the bus station, right? And that could take like 10, 20 minutes. Once I get on a bus, it probably takes 20 minutes to get to my apartment. And during that time, I could do something else, right? And what I used to do in that case is, yeah, I did used to play the Nintendo, right? I think it was 3DS. And I was also playing a mobile game on my smartphone device. But that was basically understood experience limitation that I have to play something that's designed for mobile experience. Whereas now they're pitching that you can actually get the full gaming experience as if you're playing the game in your home, uh, playing at the high resolution instead of being tied down to, okay, now I have to play mobile specific game. And this is the pitch that I think a lot of people liked on the Kickstarter, and then they got fully funded. And I think if I was living in a city where I commute by, bus or the subway tunnel, or maybe if I'm in Japan, that's like another perfect one because most likely I'll be using train to commute and not driving my car around. I think this is a perfect experience for people who want to play the game on, Xbox and not have to give up on, to play on the mobile phone. And a lot of technologies are enabling this experience, not just because you can just play the game from that was in the game console, but you can also stream. Just like
Mm.
in the episode where we talked about the how you can access the Unreal Engine 5 based metaverse from the browser because the computation of the world is actually done by some cloud computing somewhere else. It's like someone else's computer rendering all these, you know, processing heavy graphic world. Now you can get the same benefit apparently on this VITURE One, where you can do the cloud gaming so that yes, you're on the bus, the device is small, it's not powerful enough to fully power the whole Xbox game, but you can actually just stream it. And in order to get good experience from the stream, of course, then we're now talking about 5G bandwidth and maybe even to the 6G and more in the future where I'm on the bus, I get my cellular network, right? Whether it's through T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, I can get all the fastest speed I can get possible, especially in a city environment. Maybe it's harder to get the benefit in a rural area. But if you're in the city environment, you'll probably get decent cellular network speed to play the cloud gaming virtually within my glasses, within low processing power, because all the processing happens on someone else's computer.
Mm.
And let me go to another slide here. Actually, how do I navigate to the Oh,
I
there
think
you
you
go.
probably have to get out of there you go. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's a little bit of spec. 78 gram only spatial sound, heat free, 78 gram. Let me convert that into the pound. I'm more familiar in the gram, and I guess they are a US based company. 0.17 pounds. So it's very lightweight.
Yeah.
120-inch virtual screen. So yeah, it's probably bigger than most people's TV at home. And
Mm.
looks like you're still maybe stuck with the 1080p 60 FPS, which is perfect for gaming. I think most of the gaming you want to have the higher FPS, at least 60 over 4K resolution, but you can only play at 30 FPS. That's not as great of a gaming experience. So I think it makes sense that they went with the FPS and accept the lower resolution. I think in the future with the Qualcomm Snapdragon, I hope to see at least 2K resolution, 60 FPS in gaming experience, if not going to the 4K experience.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
all-in-one voice control at 128G. I don't know what that
Oh,
128G
gigabytes.
of the
As in there's it's probably
storage.
onboard storage, and then the
Oh, got it.
milliamp is the battery life,
Yeah,
which is
battery
actually
life.
quite
Yeah,
low, I think. Maybe I'm wrong there, but
it could be low, but maybe it's okay if it's just streaming
yeah.
the gaming
Yeah, it might
experience.
last longer.
Yeah, because it might not be processing as much. And a little gift that's showing like, oh, here's what you can expect to see. It's kind of like putting the VR headset and then you're seeing the big screen, except this is projected within your glasses. It's like almost like in between, like while we wait for Apple to finally solve this, true AR, true mixed reality. This is like a kind of like a in between step where you can you can get that, yeah, experience.
Awesome. Yeah, this is super interesting. It reminds me of the Nreal Air device. I think there's a lot of similarities, so I wanna dig in deeper to see some of the differences in streaming and things like that, but it seems like a pretty sleek design.
Yeah. Any additional end thought, Johnny? Are you excited about this? Are you gonna back this up? I think it was around like 500, $600.
I am not interested in this particular device, actually. I think there are a few other devices that are a little bit more sleek, but if it truly does handle the processing that it's saying, like it's able to do gaming, that would be really quite interesting because I'm thinking of there's probably two competitors that I'm looking at. Um, so I think I don't know. I mean, it's sleek. I just don't know if I want the neck thing, and I don't know if it's quite as
I
I'm not
think
doing commuting in that sense. And
I think neck thing is the biggest thing for you, right? Like I think we want to look good,
you don't want to
honestly.
look that different. Yeah, and I think when I
Yeah.
think about mass adoption of XR, like AR, VR, or even smart glasses, because I've worn smart glasses, the Focals by North for like 8 months, and it was important to like not stand out from everyone else. So you want to like
Mhm.
fit in so that nobody's asking questions, but then you still get some of the benefits of having something smart with you all the time. So it's interesting. I think it's going to be we're seeing more and more waves of these smart glasses. So I think this one's really interesting. The fact that it beat Oculus's funding, right? The speed at which it got funded was faster than Oculus's, which I think they had done something like 250,000 in 24 hours, and I think the VITURE ones actually beat that.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And so let's jump into the next article here, which actually is jumping into talking about Prada a little bit. So let me put this on the screen here. So this is getting into uh, there's actually some quite interesting things. Maybe you can help lead on some of this, Elisha, from Prada's article on the fact that they're releasing some NFTs.
Yeah, so I think the Prada's article basically says you can purchase a physical product. And if you could go to the next slide, Johnny. Yeah, basically they have this unisex T-shirt that they're selling, And as a side prize, you are going to be gifted an NFT. And if you go to the next slide, the NFT itself looks more like just a capsule. And if you go to the website, there's more detail about where you're getting. And I think the point wasn't so much about the what Prada is doing here. I think what we want to discuss is how are these fashion industry approaching the NFT project. For example, we've seen in the past where Nike starts with the drop of the the shirt, right? Where you can get the not a shirt, hoodie, sorry. You can get the Nike hoodie. And then if you collect all these like hoodie, I think you have to collect like all different kinds of it. And then you are promised to be given the actual physical hoodie at the end of it. And Prada is taking the opposite approach here, where you buy the product, the physical product first, and then you're going to get the NFT and drop afterwards. And Joni, you have some interesting statistics about the fashion industry, right? The purchasing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's been interesting. I think you talked about a few things there of companies. So like I've purchased and I've made a video actually on the TikTok account on similar topics, right? From Coca-Cola Bite. They actually had a drink that was actually introduced in Fortnite and kind of a more virtual world there. And that was something that you could purchase. And then they actually did a physical sell of those. And I think they only sold like 2,500 total. So I got a couple of those and was able to see what a bite tastes like from Coca-Cola. So that was a
Mm,
connection, like what you talked about, that digital to physical. Nike, you talked about some there. They've done that with their shoes. Adidas done that with their sweaters, with some sweaters. Um, and there's actually quite a lot of brands. I mean, if we look at just even the ones that are competitors to Prada, you got Gucci, Balmain, and there's some other names that I can't even pronounce. Fashion brands that I don't use, but that are all kind of they're essentially doing, kind of connecting to that. It's just been interesting to watch. But what is one of the interesting, I don't know if it's a direct stat, but one of the interesting takeaways that we've seen recently, and there's other articles on this, is the fact that although people are doing this, obviously people are still buying more physically than they are virtually.
mm,
So there's a lot of stats that are supporting that, like especially if you look at Gen Y and millennials, right? It's like it's still pretty rare for Gen Y to consider buying something in a virtual environment. Yeah, maybe they're buying online, right? It's essentially another form of online purchasing, but now you're in a virtual world and you're buying something for your avatar or for your environment, that kind of thing. So it's very rare for Gen Y to do that. Millennials are more likely to do it, but it's not that big of a difference. Where you have the bigger adoption in general is actually with Gen Z, which isn't
mm,
that surprising, considering that a lot of the Gen Z is growing up with Fortnite and Roblox, and they're used
mm,
to digital currencies and things like that. I think about like my one of my nephews. Almost every birthday he has, he's always like, "Oh, can I get like I don't even know what it's called, like Fortnite bucks? Can I get like the?" And they're asking me for the currency that helps them buy things in Roblox or Fortnite or these games. And instead of actual $20 in cash that they can go and buy something physical, they're more interested in like buying something for their character or buying a new skin. And so it kind of makes sense that there's bigger adoption there, but we still have a huge hurdle there, to kind of make that more and more accessible. One of the definitions of the metaverse that I've heard, Elisha, that's quite interesting and that goes really well with fashion is, somebody said that what they think the quote unquote metaverse is when your digital goods are more valuable than your physical goods. Right? They're saying at the moment that happens is when the metaverse, quote unquote, exists. And it's an interesting take because I believe that might happen in the future. Like think about all the digital things that we own, right? Like the software and things like that. And so it'll be interesting to see more and more of that wave of like, as it becomes more accessible for us to buy things virtually in virtual environments that will enable, I mean, there's going to be a bigger audience that's collecting digital goods. And so these brands are experimenting. I think it's a good time if you're a fashion brand or if you're a company that has a physical good, you're in commerce, it might be a good time to at least, keep your ear to the ground to see how these other brands are doing it. but also to see some experimentation. Having the phygital is what they're calling it, right? The physical and the digital versions. Having a phygital product might be a good stepping stone to something like completely digital, right? So that's some of my stab on some of the fashion stuff that we're seeing, like Prada with the 100 NFTs and these other brands, Gucci, things like that.
Yeah, and also probably more likely that people who are interested in buying Prada are people with the physical buying power, whereas yeah, probably less likely that Gen Z would ask, "Hey, can I buy the Prada NFT?" They probably want to spend more money on Fortnite or Roblox or somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Not in the Prada. So it makes sense that they went with the physical first because the audience that they're targeting are probably
Mm.
more inclined with the physical. And NFT is like, oh, what's NFT? And maybe they're discovering it or entering it the first time. And this is serving as introduction to the NFT by starting with the physical goods. And yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I will say Gucci did connect to Roblox and they did do NFT drops and they had a Gucci bag that sold for
Mm.
$4,115. I just Google it to make sure, but it was a virtual Gucci bag that was sold as a designer brand, designer bag in the metaverse. So it's just kind of funny how that happens. But
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
curious who bought it. I wonder if it's more like a savvy NFT investor or if it's
Yeah, oh yeah.
actual customer who owns it. It'll be interesting to discover who is behind so we really
That's true.
understand the psychology of it.
Yeah, those typically aren't Gen Z doesn't have that kind of money to spend.
Yeah.
Um, so before we jump into the question of the day, I just want to say for those that are watching or watching this after the fact, if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe. Right, this is streaming on YouTube. This is where we hold most of our content. We also stream to LinkedIn, so feel free to follow us there. We also have Twitter and TikTok accounts, so I can put that here on the bottom of the screen. Um, so you can see that Elisha has the most convenient one at Elisha Terada for Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn with Try Johnny and then Metaverse Johnny on TikTok. But we're educating and consuming, and we will be building things in the metaverse and with XR, and we'll be getting our hands on AR, VR headsets as they get released and covering some of the breaking news around this stuff. So feel free to follow for more content similar to that. Um, so with that, let's jump into the stressful part of the show where we don't know the question. No, it's not that stressful. Let's put the question of the day on the screen. It might be a little long here. Okay, there we go. As crypto becomes more mainstream, it will become less decentralized. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? As crypto becomes more mainstream, it will become less decentralized. Do you agree or disagree with the statement? All right. I'm going to defer to you to give the first response on this, Elisha. What are your thoughts on this question?
So if I define mainstream as in businesses who are looking to make a lot of money in this space and governments who also like to, get in and, compete for the power, including, political power, right? It's not just the power of the physical, you know, uh, strength against other companies, but also economic power and, controlling the digital assets, controlling the digital infrastructure. I would say I'll probably agree that it will become less decentralized overall, especially on something everyone is paying attention to. And we have even seen this trend of the crypto price trend starting to follow closely with the stock, I think, index in our market. And as the world's like economic power, right? The world's richest and the country, spending their budget into the crypto. Well, who has the power? It's either the masses, right? Or the people who has the most money. And therefore they have the most influence. And we have even seen in some of the community where there was attack on the was it the Luna forgot. There was attack on one of the cryptocurrency where
Luna coin. Yep.
Luna coin, yeah. Basically, with enough money, you can actually take over because decentralized just means everyone is a shareholder, but you can buy the amount of the percentage of the shareholder. And theoretically, if you can go over the threshold, right, certain threshold, you can essentially take over the whole thing. So I would say most things where everyone is paying attention will become more centralized because all the money, power, interest, and maybe some greed and maybe some incentives gets to the project or the community or the coins and currency where there will be takeovers. And of course, there will be also some non-legitimate ways to take over, right? You can do a lot of things to, find loopholes or vulnerability in the code, and you can take those things over. So as things gets more attention, I think it gets more competitive and therefore become more centralized. I think small communities will be left alone as decentralized, but I think it would probably depending on the size that if it's important enough, it will be controlled by someone. That's my take.
Got it. That's a good take. I mean, I like to when I get the question of the day, I like to kind of break down some of the words in here that are just that might be a little bit confusing because they might be definitions we've never talked about. So
Mm,
you've already covered some of those, but just to summarize a little bit on what a centralized versus decentralized, let's talk about exchanges, right? So centralized exchanges, the best way to kind of think about it, good examples are things like traditional banks, Chase Bank. I use Chase Bank or Bank of America or things like that. They're banks that people use mostly on a daily basis. So if you have like a debit card in your wallet, the issuing bank is a centralized authority. They're an centralized exchange and they're operated by a central authority that might manage all the transactions, right? The company that's itself, so like Chase Bank would be responsible for holding the ledger, right? Executing the transaction, securing the data of the users, and other responsibilities that come with managing financial stuff, right? So that's the decentralized. Decentralized is they don't rely on a bank, a company, or a centralized authority, but instead they use like what's called, and you use this all, you hear this all the time, Elisha, like the interwoven system of users and their devices, right? And by using that, they're decentralizing the data, and so the digital ledger is distributed. So by like widely distributing the network, it gives each user an equal share in the ownership, and then it eliminates dependency on the third party. So given that context, as it becomes more popular, I do think that exchanges will still be distributed. Like decentralized, it will be decentralized still. I think what we're talking about is will it become less decentralized? I think what that means is more of like I think about metaverse environments like Somnium Space or Decentraland are technically decentralized metaverse environments, but there's a company, there's an organization
mm,
that technically is still responsible for the building of the environment, right? So if you're talking about like environments, so the utilization of decentralized, like how you take something that's decentralized and turn that into an application, right? Like you and I, Elisha, or at Fresh Consulting, we could build our own metaverse environment and it could be owned by Fresh Consulting, and it's decentralized and it's distributed and it's on the Ethereum blockchain. All of that can be true, and between now and 10 years it's still decentralized, but at the end of the day, we're the company building it, right? So in a way, we do have some control, right? The companies still have control, and the companies themselves are centralized. And so I think this is the dilemma, is that you can have a corporation that is building on top of a blockchain that is centralized, that's building on top of a decentralized environment or a blockchain. Does that make sense? So I think
mhm,
that's the dilemma. And so as it's becoming more mainstream, I think you're going to get more and more corporations like Epic Games and Meta and all these companies that are big organizations that are doing cool things, and people have different perspectives on that. But you're going to have more and more corporations build their own